Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us. I canned some green beans this summer out of the garden, but I also tried a new preservation method. Or new for me, it's actually quite old. Leather britches. These are air dried. I did a video showing you how to do it. And after a couple months, I cooked some just to check the quality, and they turned out wonderfully. Let me show you how that went. Well, here are my leather britches, and these have been hanging. One rack was hanging in my closet, this rack right here, and the other was hanging in my dining room. Both of them were out of direct sunlight. I just wanted to see if one was better than the other. And these are fully dried. They were fully dried after about 3 weeks. And I'll show the video of how I made these, but it was super simple. And what I have now is very crunchy. You can hear it when I move it. It's just crunchy. They're totally dried. And now the process is to cook them up so that they taste like fresh. So the first thing is to take them off the string. And this is a double string, so you just cut it at one end and start pulling them off, and they don't pull off all that easily, but because it's a double string, you can kind of pull on it and just start giving them a tug. You may want to cut the string a couple of times as we go. So they're pretty tight. Now, these were out of the sun. When I was a girl, people strung up leather britches. Most folks didn't have pressure canners, and they were very expensive. And when somebody did have pressure canners, they would share them around the neighborhood. So people would find different ways to preserve. And lots of folks hung green beans to dry. And sometimes they'd hang them inside, and sometimes they'd hang them out in a shed. But if they get too much light, then they bleach out totally white, and they don't get their color back when you cook them. This is what we've got. I don't remember exactly how many we started with before we dried, but this will give us a great big pot of beans. Remember, they're dehydrated. Now, I washed them really well before I strung them up, and right now I'm just adding cold water. And I'm going to push them down in there to get them as submerged as I can. So this is 2 steps in cooking. The first is that we rehydrate. And I'm just going to cover them with water and put the lid on the pan. I will stir them around a little bit because I don't want them just all floating on the top. I want them all covered. So it's about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, in the evening now. I'm going to cover these. And I'm going to just let these sit on the counter, or actually on the stove, without heat, and rehydrate overnight. I'll see you in the morning. So the next morning I've drained these and rinsed them off a bit, and I'm going to cover them again in water, and we're going to start cooking them. Now these are planned for dinner tonight, and it's, I don't know, 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. And so that means I'm going to cook them a long time. And they won't be crispy when we're done. And if you like crispy green beans, you won't like these. They're going to be very soft and cooked very tender. I've got here some neck bones. We want to add meat to these. And you can use a ham hock. You can use some bacon. The neck bones I have here, and I'll kind of show you what I mean by neck bones. These are pork, and they're cured the same as ham. They have quite a bit of meat on them, but they would be hard to eat just as they are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse the salt off because they're very salty. And I'm going to put these down in the beans and let them cook very slowly all day long too. And before I serve them, I will strip the meat off of the bones. So what you're going to have is more like a bean soup with lots of meat in it. Soft beans, soft meat, Very keto, by the way. See, there's lots of meat in there, but it's kind of hard to get at. So we're going to cook it off. Now I'll put these on the stove covered. I'm not adding salt. There's plenty of salt in the meat. If you're using a meat that's not so salty, then you may want to salt the beans a little bit. Wait until they're almost done, because that can make them a little tough. So these are ready to go. Put the lid on. When I put them on the stove, I will bring them to a simmer. Then I'll turn them down very, very low. See, there's some tomatoes I'm going to have with these tonight, right out of my garden. When I was a girl, these would have been cooked in a cast iron Dutch oven, put directly in the coals in the fireplace, and you would leave them cook all day long. Right now we're going to use a stove. So I don't know how much later, I kind of lost track of time, but I want to check these, maybe 3 hours. I want to check these and see if they need any water. They've still got water down in there, and we're cooking really slowly. And the way that I tell if they're done is if the meat is done. And I want the meat to be fall off the bone tender, because I want to get the bones out before I serve it. And this is not quite ready. It doesn't come right off. So I'm going to cover them back up, come back in a couple hours. And I think it's ready now. We're going to pull this meat off the bone. I could probably take it out and do it with gloved hands, but I'm just going to do this so you can see. Just pull that meat down off the bone. Take any bones out of the pot. So when we're done, we'll have really, really soft, but they still have some texture to them. Green beans with big pieces of meat all through it. This actually tastes like ham. It's neck bones. You can get different kinds of cured meat, but we would use neck bones or something like that you wouldn't normally cook and you didn't want to waste. You wanted to get the goodness from it. You wanted to get the calories for sustenance. When you were living on a farm, you didn't let anything go to waste. Everything that could be eaten was eaten. So here we go. And I want you to see that pot liquor down there. When people talk about cooking leather britches, they rave about the pot liquor. Normally you would serve this with cornbread, or I would. I hesitate to call these Southern style green beans. These are country style green beans. And if you had a big garden, you would preserve rows and rows and rows of these and hang them somewhere protected from the elements. And then all winter, you could have these green beans, and they're naturally dried. They retain all their nutrients. When you bite into that, it's textured, but not tough. It's just perfect. Not bad for my first try doing these alone. My mother laughed at me. She said, "I don't think you'll like them." And I said, "Well, I think I will." By the way, if you want more details on this, I got this idea from the Foxfire books. I remembered it from my childhood and wanted to get the details. Now look at that pot liquor. That is very tasty stuff. It's got the meat juice, the bean juice. Over cornbread, it's wonderful. I'm not having cornbread because I'm eating low carb. But this is part of my Sunday dinner. I'll show you the rest of it here just a second. One grandson's home from the army. He always wants fried chicken. He always gets fried chicken. And he always wants mac and cheese. And yes, he always gets mac and cheese. But the star of the show for me is leather britches. And these turned out maybe better than my memory. And I'm really glad I did them. And I've got several of these put up so that I can have it a couple times over the winter. And next year I think I will put up more. They are very rich tasting green beans, country style, soft, not tough at all, yummy with the meat, green beans, preserved in the old-fashioned way, no canner needed, just a needle and thread. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. Hope to see you again tomorrow. And hey, there'll be a link to the video for making these right now.